trying to fight to keep the matriarchy in power, knowing that these patriarchs was going to find a way, and they eventually said she killed herself. This is contemporary with your Jesus story, by the way. Jesus in Greek is spelled I-E-S-O-U-S, and the English rendition is I-S-I-S. But they told us it was J-E-S-U-S. Right? Because they turned the I into a J, because they books say, I will make you fisher of men. It became the hook on the hook and the flail of the Pharaoh. And then they gave it the same phonetic sound as the G. You didn't need a J. The Semitic languages had the gene, but in the Egyptian is the only place where there was a sound equivalent to the J, but it can still be translated as a G, which is the snake, right? So when they get done replacing Cleopatra, remember, the Bible was not assembled to 325 AD. The Cleopatra was living in the contemporary time with the person they call Jesus. Jesus in Greek is Isis. When you go to the Strong's Concordance and you look up Jesus, it's going to spell it I-E-S-O-U-S. Then you use the grammar pronunciation key, because vowels, it changes the pronunciation of the consonant and the vowel that either follow or precede, depending on if the vowel is following or preceding the consonant. So the I cancels out the E, but it makes the S sound go hard on the S, and the O is merged as one vowel with the U that gives us the O sound. And then it makes the S at the tail go hard, S. So the proper pronunciation of the Greek name Jesus in English would be Isis, right? This is all part of the Roman construct. We reconstructing what they call the great Babylonian empires that started with the head of gold and the breastplate of brass and all the way down to the feet of iron and clay. You strike the foundation and you bring down all that it ever stood for. The foundation of the fraud is the usurpation of the feminine with the feminine masculine, which is homosexual, which is romance, which is Roman customs and traditions that's passed on through the Etruscans to defile the princes to make them unfit to rule. They sexually assault the males as youth. So when they begin to tap into their chakra system, the root chakra being shattered sends a mixed message to the crown chakra, which causes a condition that we call in the DMSB manual schizophrenia, paranoid delusions, multiple personality. It's a shattered oracle is what it used to be called. Right. And this is why all of the Roman emperors was hardcore homosexuals, because they was all trying to make the next male unfit to rule, as in the case of Caligula and his uncle. You with me, Rich?
Yeah, man. I'm listening, man. It's interesting. Yeah.
All this stuff is in a combination of historical texts and mythological literature. But because of the scrambled egg effect, where they took the story, which is called the Holy Drama, and they altered it so there's just enough of your memory will make you attached to that doctrine. Because remember, we coming out of several different spells of sleep. The Sumerians put us in the spell of Kingu with somebody named Humbaba. And the priests in Egypt put us under something called the Amen spell. That's why you put Amen behind all your prayers, to keep your God self sleep so that your Lord self can wander around in darkness. And then we have what's called the George Washington Conjure, which is another blood. All these are blood ritual spells used to put us in a stupor so that they can continuously rule over us. But once we discover how it works, it no longer has effect and it frees the mind. And to free the mind is to free the soul. There you go.
Rod, you said something earlier. Oh, well, you know what? I'm gonna go into that later. But when we look at Denzel, who does Denzel represent in antiquity? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Who does he represent in antiquity besides being a colored brother?
Okay, so I don't know which character he's playing because I haven't looked into it like that.
He owns slaves. He owns slaves, I think. I think he owns some of the
right. And he was an organizer of the Colosseum fights, the gladiator fights in the Colosseums. In modern terms, we would call him a dirty Moor. We wouldn't call him a righteous Moor. It's a difference in the two. And you can tell because the dirty Moors look at other people as an expendable product, but the righteous Moors look for the brotherhood in mankind. They are a different animal altogether. They look the same, but they're not the same.
Right.
Which takes us back to Kendrick Lamar and the Crip Walking and the OV song, and now it's all coming full circle. Right. Once we start exposing the sorcery, because that's the only thing that was holding us back. We had to educate ourselves out of the condition in order to perceive the deception in the historical narrative given in order to tell the accurate history of our people. This is why they kept taking all of our leadership, because they don't want us to know who we is, because there's only two ways you can lose your birthright: forfeit or surrender. And normally if you get conquered, you have what's called a Jubilee redemption period. Right? And the Jubilee is when, if you remember your birthright and your tribal traditions that you can use to claim your birthright, then they supposed to voluntarily surrender it to you. You ain't supposed to have to fight them for it. And this is being enforced by spiritual forces that's stronger than any of these bombs these mortals is building. And that's how we got in this, from bombs.
So when we look at the movie Gladiator, and the people remember the first Gladiator, what percentage at that time of Rome, because we don't know how much we've been lied to about history, what percentage of Rome at that time, we think we had nothing to do with Rome? And I remember Bobby Hemmett was one of the first people who taught about the Etruscans. So I want to ask you two things. Who were the Etruscans, and what percentage of Rome at that time were melanated people?
So the Etruscans was, they were they originate on Mount Hermon.
Okay.
And when they came down off of Mount Hermon, they wasn't calling themselves Etruscans, but they got kicked out of Africa. When they kicked them out of Africa, they went across the Pillars of Hercules, where Europe is separated from Africa by the Mediterranean outlet to the ocean. And when they got kicked out of Africa, they went into Europe and set up the Etruscan or Tuscany, right? But they went a different way as well. In Turkey, they set up what's called the Ottoman Empire. So now you're talking Byzantine kings.
Who kicked them out of Africa, Rod?
Africans.
Okay.
The reason they got kicked out of Africa was for using people for human capital and starting strife between tribes that was formerly peaceful. In the Nation of Islam, Elijah said everywhere they go, they cause mischief and bloodshed. They get between two peaceful people and turn them against each other, and then they offer them a solution.
So the Etruscans was some foul niggas.
They've been foul since they landed on Mount Hermon.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Now, when you talking about Mount Hermon, now you talking about the ones they call the fallen ones, right? But they don't tell you that each one of the 200 was in charge of several hundred soldiers.
Right.
That's what they don't tell you. And this is why they tell you that verse in the Bible that say we are legion, for we are many.
Yeah.
But it's still not more of them than it is us. We the majority, they the minority. And when I say we, I'm talking about the earthborn tribes, different skin colors, different hair textures, dating back to Atlantis. Right? We didn't have skin-based discriminatory practices. We called people by their family lineage or their geographical point of origin. They started changing names to confuse us, and then they created something called nationalities that fall under the jurisdiction of a common agenda. We call it today the Uniform Commercial Code, but in the ancient times, it was called the Code of Thieves.
Right. Okay.
The Code of Thieves was originally written to exploit people. It was the code that all thieves supposed to follow.
Wow.
And that's why when you're reading in the Uniform Commercial Code, it tell you that when the rightful owner asserts his jurisdiction over his rightful inheritance, then the holder is obligated to surrender it without resistance. It's in the Uniform Commercial Code. That's an extraction directly from the ancient Code of Thieves. Right? The group in India that was assembled to fight against these people that followed the Code of Thieves were called the Thuggee. And they were sacred to, the deity they held sacred was Kali Ma, the Dark Mother, the Timekeeper. Right? Because every 26,000 years, she gonna show up and show out. And this is where we at now. The thugs came to overthrow the fraudulent kings in order to put the Nagas back in power. They look like us, but they not us. And this is the greatest confusion on the historical record that keeps them in power. And the last drop to break is the mental poison they call racism. Right? The superiority complex is being used because of the natural nature of extremism of the earthborn. Right? If you kill one of ours, we killing 10 of yours, and no question about it. Unless we was held back by a outside spiritual agency, as in sorcery. Right? So when the elders made the agreement, they knew that we was gonna fight back. But all of the ones that wanted to fight back, they knew, well, we can't leave this one in the community. All you got to do is create a condition and he'll react to it. This sociology and social engineering using the science of sociology. All of this dates back to the Talmud and the Mishnah before they had a Bible. Right? The Talmud and the Mishnah is the writing of the priests who was held in the so-called Babylonian captivity, where they picked up the money rights, Babylonian money magic. They picked up the blood rights, Babylonian blood magic. And they picked up the sex right, which was the Babylonian sex magic. How do I use these three